Hi, everyone. I'm coming out with a book on August 23rd, and it's called The God Who Riots, Taking Back the Radical Jesus. And it's really exciting. Recently, my publisher sent me a bunch of advanced reader copies to send to promoters and reviewers, and some of my friends really wanted one, and so I had to say, sorry, you have to wait. And then they were like, why, you don't think I'm an advanced reader? Am I not advanced enough for you? I was like, yeah, exactly, sorry. And one of them really wants to get a copy and hold on to it for decades, thinking it could build value and then resell it later, probably half joking. And he was like, it's gonna be an original copy, never before read. And I was like, never before read? And he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna read it. And I was like, isn't every new copy of a book never before read? And he's like, yeah, but this is gonna be the original never before read. Mint, you know? So yeah, they're really excited. And it feels good to have a community that supports me in that way, and this community that supports me. Because I've always been looking for a supportive community. When I was 19, I felt called into ministry and started this sort of Bible study type group where we could talk about the topics that we felt like we couldn't talk about in our churches. And I called the group The Hallway, and it lasted a couple years. And I dedicated my book to The Hallway. And inclusion was one of the most important values for this group. And I got to talk about all the things that I was learning as I started this ministry journey. And as I kept learning, I kept finding myself drawn to theological perspectives that were outside the boundaries of our conservative evangelical bubble, which was terrifying. Like, how many of you have been there before? It's like I knew that if I were to be more honest about the things I was beginning to believe, then I would lose my whole spiritual community that supported me and cared for me. Can anyone give me examples of some of the things you evolved on that threatened your security in a spiritual community? And I'll repeat that. And, Celibacy? What about the Bible?
It's not inerrant.
Oh, the inerrancy of the Bible? Realizing it's not so inerrant? Yeah. Any more? LGBTQ rights, yes.
Is there a God?
Is there a God? Yeah, we gotta go deep. Absolutely. Yeah, back then, me and one of my best friends at the time started questioning our church's anti-LGBTQ stance. And one night we got together and talked it all out. And then we came to the conclusion that the only thing holding us back from being fully affirming was that we would lose our community. Because we knew God was cool with queer people. It's obviously, right? What a lot of people don't quite understand is many Christians leave Christian communities for Christian reasons. It's like we're given the tools to grow, and then we hit the ceiling and have to break free. So one day I asked my friends in the hallway, would you still be friends with me if I was a heretic? By the way, the root word for heretic means able to choose. So essentially I was asking them, would you still be friends with me if I chose to believe differently? And the whole question seems so silly now looking back at it, but back then I was deadly serious. And once again, I knew God was okay with me. I just needed a community of people to be okay with me, as we all do. When I first experienced depression and anxiety, I was in this ministry program away from home, and it was really difficult because I had heard that people were criticizing me behind my back and questioning if I should even be there, which made me feel really isolated and made the depression worse. And then I started meditating a lot and praying a lot, trying to heal myself, and I started to feel better. And I came to the conclusion that no matter how people treat me here, I am safe within God, who loves me and values me no matter what. And that was a comforting idea in this environment where I felt really unsafe. And then one day my pastor there asked me how I was doing, and I told him everything going on, how I was feeling safe within God despite everything going on and how people were treating me. And then at the end of the conversation, when I was done, he smiled and said, "I'm really glad that our church can make people feel safe." It's like it went completely over his head. We're on totally different pages, and it seemed impossible to try to get him to understand what I was saying. Have any of you been there before? Where it's like, you know you're safe within God, but you're unsure if you're safe in the community that taught you about this God. Feeling like, if we took this God seriously, that you say loves everyone, things should look totally different than how they look now. People are taught about love and grace, and then experience a significant lack of love and grace in the community teaching them. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, "Hypocrisy rather than heresy is the cause of spiritual decay." It's the hypocrisy. Can anyone tell me examples of the hypocrisy we see in a lot of Christian institutions today? Favoritism? Pro-life? SBC with all the sexual allegations and finding out they had a whole list of sexual predators that they're keeping private? Yeah. So back when I asked my friends, would you still be my friend if I became a heretic? I asked that because I was longing, and I've always been longing, for a spiritual community that was as loving and inclusive as I knew spiritual communities could actually be capable of. And so eventually I had to leave that church and denomination I grew up in. But before I left, I spent years trying really hard to make it work. And I found myself always looking for secret comrades that I could trust. Like one time at this conference for our denomination, this conservative evangelical denomination, there was a pastor there who spoke, but he seemed to be hinting at some of the more like progressive ideas I was thinking about at the time. So afterward, I tracked him down in the parking lot, and I started telling him how much I liked his talk, and I think he started to sense that I could be a secret comrade. And so he got really serious for a moment, and he crossed his arms, and he said, "Are you familiar with the Enneagram?" I said, "Yes." And then he said, "What number are you?" Like he was testing me. And I said, "3, what number are you?" He said, 4. "Are you familiar with spiral dynamics?" Some more nerdy stuff. And I said, "Yeah." And then his whole demeanor changed. It became open and his arms came down. And it was like in that moment we knew we could trust each other and not report each other to the Inquisition or something. And he started telling me the stuff he was actually into. Have any of you been there before? Where you have to suss people out to see if you could actually be yourself and say what you actually believe? Yeah. And then at the end of our conversation, he said, "By the way, me and some guys are hanging out with Rob Bell next week. You should join us." It was such a weird experience. And so I had to leave. And after I left, I found myself in more inclusive spiritual spaces, which was refreshing. I could now have public comrades instead of just a bunch of secret ones. And that's something that I felt like I was always after. It's like I finally got what I was looking for. Inclusion, hospitality, embrace, being able to have a community where we're unifying people and connecting with people and loving people. And that's something that draws people to different inclusive spiritual spaces. It's like they get tired of the polarization in society, the us versus them stuff, the discrimination, and then they're relieved to finally be in a spiritual space where people are unified and they preach equality. Because deep down, many of us know we're all actually connected. We're all one, right? One with everything, one with everyone. That's the kind of like non-dualistic truth that inspires a community like this. There's a really cheesy joke about the Dalai Lama going into a pizza shop, and he asks, "Can you make me one with everything?" Terrible joke. I know, terrible. Even funnier is when a journalist repeated the joke to the Dalai Lama and he didn't get it. And then after a long pause, the Dalai Lama said, "That's technically impossible." But deep down, every now and then, we have these moments where we experience a feeling of oneness with everything and everyone, our interconnectedness. Can anyone tell me examples of like places or times or activities where you feel that? One with everything or everyone? Psychedelics? Singing together? Say that again?
Meditation.
What was it?
Meditation.
Meditation.
Grieving.
One time me and my friends went to the desert, got an Airbnb and did psychedelics. And as it started hitting me, I started getting these profound revelations about our interconnectedness, and they're rushing in too fast for me to write down. So I went into the bedroom while my friends were in the living room, and I grabbed my phone and started speaking as fast as I could into my phone, recording it. But I felt like I had to speak really quietly because I thought that if my friends heard me, they would come in and respond and disrupt my train of thought. But from my friends' perspective, they just heard me in this dark bedroom at the end of a dark hallway, rapidly whispering like, they thought I was possessed. And eventually, one of my friends got the courage to come in and check on me, posing and walking like this for some reason. It was hitting him in his own way, I guess. And when I saw him, I flipped around and told him, with the most sincere conviction I've ever had in my life, I said, "I just realized we're literally the same person." And I meant it literally. And then he yells back at me, "I was just thinking the same thing." We're all connected. It's something that many of us suspect, and then there are moments where we just know it. And it's comforting in a world where we know that we're not actually all one, where we're actually incredibly disconnected. In a world where many of us are discriminated against, where many of us struggle to survive more than others. And we need more inclusive and safe and loving spiritual communities. But inclusion on its own is not enough. Just like safe spaces are necessary, but they're not enough when we live in such an unsafe world. Several states right now are trying to pass bills that target trans people to take away their rights from living freely as they are. Several states are trying to ban abortion. White supremacist violence is on the rise, inspired by conspiracy theories that say black and brown people are trying to replace white people. And that theory is repeated in mainstream news. Just yesterday, there was the shooting in Texas at that elementary school, which we're still processing and grieving. And when we see that kind of stuff, we know that it's connected to larger issues that make this world difficult to live in for so many of us. And I think one of my favorite things about the teachings of Jesus is that even though he knows God loves and values everyone, he doesn't go around teaching a message of universal love. Instead, he teaches what he needs to. He goes and teaches, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh." And a blessing was a way of saying God is on your side. Today we have that word blessed all flipped upside down. Like today when we use the word blessed or hashtag blessed, we're often referring to people who could like afford a vacation home or something, or a bidet, something like that, you know? It's like the more bougie someone is, the more blessed they are. But what's interesting is to the bougiest of people, Jesus in the same teaching said, "Woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are filled, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing, for you will mourn and weep." Jesus made it a point to favor those who society unfavored. Jesus went to those who were dehumanized and humanized them. And when Jesus forgave people, he didn't go and find the people who were guilty of the most sin and forgive them. He went to those who had the most sin done to them, the poor, the sick, and the outcasts, who had to suffer the most as a result of the sins of their community. And when Jesus forgave them, what he was doing was releasing them from the guilt of society's sins, allowing them to stop looking inward for the source of their suffering, and empowering them to start looking outward and to transform the world that causes so much of their suffering. This is why the church in Acts immediately starts building these communities where they share property, they take care of the poor, they feed the hungry, they heal the sick. They reminded people of God's love by fulfilling their needs. I could go on all day about this, that's why I wrote a whole book about it. But my point is, if there's going to be a future for spiritual communities, a future for Christianity, a future for religion, what I would like to see is a world where spiritual communities can use their gifts, first off, to remind people that you are way more valuable than what any unjust institution or unjust ideology claims of us. And you deserve to be treated better. And to do something about the ways that we are mistreated and alienated in our world. Because inclusion on its own is not enough. Spiritually, we may be all connected, and materially, we're very disconnected. There's this story about a man who thought he was seed, like literal grain of seed, and he goes to a psychoanalyst, and he, over time, is able to be convinced that he is not seed, he's a human being. But then one day, the man comes back to the psychoanalyst and says, terrified, "There's a chicken outside my door, and it's trying to eat me." And the psychoanalyst is confused and says, "But you know you're not seed, you know you're a human being." And then the man says, "Yeah, I know that, but do the chickens know?" We could do so much to help people love themselves and see their inherent value, but as long as those who devalue them continue, then we gotta change them. We gotta convince the chickens. I could love my enemies, but still have enemies because they won't let up. So yeah, years ago I asked my friends, would you still be my friend if I became a heretic? If I chose to believe differently? If I chose to live differently? And they said, yes, of course. And that felt really good at the time, to be supported in that way. But now I look back and I feel like that's the bare minimum of what should be required of a spiritual community. We're capable of so much more, and there's so much work to do. If we want more inclusion, then we got to transform the systems that preserve power in the hands of the few and use exclusion to justify it. If we want people to love themselves and to love each other, then we got to transform the systems that cause us to hate ourselves and hate each other. And if we want to realize the truth of our interconnectedness, then we got to transform the systems that disconnect us. There's a lot more that we're always capable of. So now, I want to take some discussion questions. They're going to pop up on the screen. Or if you have the Way Collective app, you can also download it real quick. The questions are on there. First, society. What larger societal changes need to be made to make inclusion easier and safer? Sacred. Besides more inclusion, what are some characteristics you would like to see in spiritual communities, including this one? And self. How have you been excluded in the past? How did it feel? How have you been included in the past? How did it feel?